In the early morning of May 10, 1940, 74 elite German paratroopers are conducting last-minute inspections before boarding 11 gliders to Belgium. It's at that very moment that the reality of the situation dawns on the 23-year-old Lieutenant Witzek, commander of Task Force Granite. They were minutes away from attempting one of the most incredible military operations of all time, the capture of the most fortified fortress in the world, outnumbered 10 to 1, all in less than 20 minutes. In January of 1933, Adolf Hitler is appointed Chancellor of Germany. His rise to power is fueled by his promise to avenge the humiliating defeat of the German Empire during World War I. By 1935, Hitler has rejected the armistice of 1918 and begins building the most powerful military the world has ever seen. By the end of the 1930s, there is little doubt that the Germans are on the warpath. Following World War I, the armies of the Allied powers were significantly reduced in size and effectiveness, fostering a reliance on defensive warfare. The Maginot Line, named after the French Minister of War, would come to be yet again France's main defense strategy against Germany. Bordering Switzerland, Germany, and Belgium, the Maginot Line was a line of concrete fortifications, obstacles, and weapon installation built to deter invaders. Considered impervious to most forms of attack, the consensus amongst the Allied powers was that it would force Germany into Belgium. Leading up to the Second World War, several of Hitler's most prominent generals would spend years developing a plan for the invasion of France. The German commander-in-chief and his chief of staff would propose a German advance that would take the bulk of the army through the Netherlands and Belgium. A predictable strategy that was met with staunch criticism by the commander of Army Group Alpha, Erich von Manstein, and the commander of the 19th Panzer Corps, General Heinz Guderian. They would in turn petition to Hitler a plan launching 3 Panzer Corps through the Ardennes forest. By emphasizing speed and security, the German forces would attempt to cut off the Allied forces from their line of communication and resupply. However, in order for that maneuver to be successful, the main body of the Allied force would need to be committed to the lowlands of northern France and Belgium. In other words, the German forces would have to create a credible feint in order to deceive the Allied forces of their true intent. The proposal was quickly approved by Hitler, who was particularly fond of the boldness involved. In order to ensure that the Allies committed forces to the north, the Germans had to move swiftly through Holland and into Belgium. This required moving 2 Panzer Corps through Belgium to engage the British and French forces. However, before the Germans could get deep into Belgium, they would have to cross the Albert Canal, which could only be crossed at 3 bridges. The entire campaign would hinge on securing those bridges. Any delay into Belgium would have significant repercussions on their ability to draw the Allies into a decisive engagement. Although the Belgian defenses around the Albert Canal posed no immediate threat to the German army, the formidable fortress of Epernay would test the might of the Wehrmacht. Completed in 1935, Epernay commanded the Albert Canal and was seen by the Belgian military as being the principal barrier against an attack from her eastern borders. Located on a hill, the fortress was considered to be impregnable and the largest in the world. Fort Epernay was an enlarged development of the original Belgian defenses designed before World War I. From north to south, the fort was 900 meters long and 700 meters from east to west. It served as a base, as well as an artillery position that featured 2 120mm guns and a dozen 75mm guns, giving the fort the ability to bomb targets across a wide area of the eastern Liège. Getting into the fort would have been very difficult. It possessed a single entrance located on the southwest with a reinforced steel door. The eastern wall facing the canal was over 60 meters in height, while the other 2 walls were 40 meters high and nearly vertical, making climbing the fort all but impossible. The fort was comprised of multiple guns, turrets, and observation posts surrounded by a defended ditch. The defenses were also placed so that each mutually covered the other. On top of the fort were 12 casemates and 5 operational cupolas similar in construction to the turrets of a battleship. They had guns protruding from apertures of either reinforced steel domes or of concrete blockhouses. Each fighting position housed 30 to 60 men depending on the size and number of guns. The fort itself was connected within by a series of tunnels that totaled many kilometers. The fort was also self-sufficient as it contained barracks, sick bays, and a communication center. The tunnel complex even had a ventilation system complete with filters in case of a poison gas attack. Undoubtedly, the fortress of Epernay was a state-of-the-art military facility. The force tasked with assaulting the fort and capturing the 3 bridges was formed from elements of the 7th Air Division and was named Assault Detachment Koch. The assault detachment consisted of an airborne infantry company as well as a reinforced airborne combat engineer platoon. The force was divided into 4 assault groups with each their own objective. Group Steel, formed of 92 men and 9 gliders, would capture the first bridge. Group Concrete, composed of 96 men and 11 gliders, would capture the second bridge. Group Iron, composed of 90 men and 10 gliders, would capture the third bridge. And last but not least, Group Granite, composed of 74 men and 11 gliders, would capture the fort of Epernay. All groups were further broken down into squads of 6 to 8 persons each. The plan for the assault was the following. The platoon would depart Cologne and insert via gliders under the cover of darkness. They would land on top of the fort and destroy all the artillery pieces that posed an immediate threat to the German forces attacking the bridge. Once complete, they would hold the top of the fort and repel any counterattacks until reinforcements arrived. Time being a critical factor for the mission, the task force would need to complete all objectives in less than 60 minutes. The mission would rely heavily on the ability of the Luftwaffe to insert the combat engineers undetected via gliders. Given the silent nature of the platform, and since Belgian anti-aircraft defenses used sound location arrays and not radar, the gliders were chosen to achieve the element of surprise. The glider chosen for the mission was the model DFS-230. At approximately 37 feet in length and with a wingspan of 72 feet, the glider was capable of carrying up to 10 combat-loaded troops and attaining a maximum speed of 180 miles per hour. Although armed with a single flexible MG-15 and 2 fixed MG-34, the gliders were extremely vulnerable to any type of fire. Leading up to the mission, the combat engineers along with the glider pilots would train together for 6 months in complete secrecy. The training would also involve the development and application of a specialized explosive charge designed to penetrate reinforced concrete. The newly designed hollow-shaped charge allowed conventional explosives to create a jet of high pressure immediately upon detonation. This generated a tremendous penetrating capability and allowed a relatively small amount of explosives to have a large effect on both steel and concrete. A 50 kilogram charge was able to penetrate both the 6-inch steel cupolas and the concrete reinforced casemates. In the evening of May 9, 1940, Assault Detachment Koch receives the order to begin Phase 2 of the operation. On May 10th, at 3 a.m., Assault Detachment Koch is filing onto a blacked out tarmac in Cologne as the loudspeakers play Richard Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries. 30 minutes later, the 42 gliders carrying the 493 airborne troops are lifted off. The flight from Cologne to Belgium would take approximately 50 minutes. Unbeknownst to the Germans, the Belgians at the fort of the Denemal are almost immediately alerted of their movement towards the border. The alarm is raised and every available soldier is forced into the defensive position. Now 10 minutes into the insertion, the tow cable of the glider carrying Lieutenant Witzig breaks off. With no chance of making it to the objective, the glider lands on the east side of the Rhine. Shortly after, a miscommunication error causes Squad 2 to unhitch. Now 25 miles away from the objective, the glider of Squad 2 is forced to land short. Just minutes into the mission, the engineer platoon had already lost 2 squads and its platoon commander. 4 a.m., the commander of the fort receives confirmation that over 30 gliders have crossed into Dutch territory. A few moments later, the calm summer night erupts into a thunderous haze of raging bullets and tracers. The German gliders, now directly above the fort, come under heavy fire from anti-aircraft and machine gun fire. The gliders descend sharply onto the objective. Squad 1 is able to land safely on the ground. They immediately exit the glider under heavy fire and rush their target, casemate 18. A 50 kilogram shaped charge is placed in the center of the concrete structure and detonates. The charge blows the turret into pieces, killing 2 Belgians inside. Moments later, another 12.5 kilogram charge is placed on the other 75mm gun. The explosion levels the gun, killing another 2 Belgian soldiers and wounding several more. Squad 1 then quickly enters the casemate, clearing the objective of the concussed Belgians. Meanwhile, the glider containing Squad 3, assigned to destroy casemate 12, is able to make a perfect approach under fire and lands almost on top of the casemate. The squad then hurries from the glider and charges the target. To their surprise, no one is firing at them. They were able to catch the enemy completely by surprise. In the heat of the battle, many of the Belgian soldiers occupying the casemates had lost track of the gliders. Once on top of the objective, a 12.5 kilogram shaped charge is placed on the gun. The blast tears the gun from its mount, crushing a Belgian soldier and wounding several others. The Germans fire their automatic rifles through the opening and cautiously clear the objective. Under panic, the Belgian troop retreat into the confine of the fort's tunnel. Squad 3 then decides to aggressively pursue their enemy into the tunnel, where they discover an elevator shaft. A 3 kilogram charge is then lobbed into the pit, killing multiple unsuspecting soldiers and destroying the access to casemate 12. In the same instance, Squad 4 assigned to casemate 19 comes under fire as soon as they land. They quickly rush their target under fire, forcing the machine gunners inside to close the steel observation door from which they're firing. A 3 kilogram charge is squeezed down the observation periscope that protruded from the cupola. The explosion causes significant damage to the structure. However, the occupants continue firing the artillery guns. A 50-kilogram charge is then placed on the objective, but the explosion fails to penetrate the steel or destroy the gun. Another 50-kilogram charge is then placed on the casemate, this time blowing a large hole through the concrete that had been weakened by the previous charge, killing or wounding everyone inside. The squad then establishes a defensive position around the objective to stop any counterattack through the hole. Simultaneously, Squad 5 immediately assaults Cupola 23 upon landing. The charge destroys the gun mount. With the objective already complete, Squad 5 takes the initiative of attacking Casemate 30. Under fire, they're able to maneuver their way to the casemate and place a 50-kilogram charge. The explosion kills at least 2 soldiers but fails to completely neutralize the gun. Immediately after, the squad comes under heavy fire from the storage shed and Casemate 31 that have now spotted them following the explosion. The squad is able to reach a ditch from where they attempt several times to withdraw to a safer position but are ultimately unable. Concurrently, the glider carrying Squad 6 is shredded by anti-aircraft fire and forced to land north of the fort in a field of barbed wire, which brings the plane to a violent stop. Under heavy fire, the squad manages to exit the glider. Now in the open, surrounded by thick barbed wire, the squad leader is able to successfully maneuver his element to their objective. However, several Germans are wounded in the process. Upon reaching their target, the squad discovers that their objective is a fake cupola. The objective being complete, the commander of Squad 6 orders his soldiers to establish a machine gun position overlooking the canal and the western side of the wall, essentially cutting off the fort from any immediate reinforcements. Meanwhile, Squad 7 is also able to land on the northern side of the fort. Under fire, they proceed to their target, where they also discover a fake cupola. Their objective complete, they establish a defensive position facing south and proceed laying covering fire for the other squads. Since the firing had started, the glider carrying Squad 8 was receiving the bulk of the anti-air fire. In an act of desperation, the pilot nosedives his glider into the canal, almost crashing into the water. At the last moment, he is able to pull up before hitting the fort and lands just feet away from Casemate 31. Seconds after landing, the squad is fired upon by multiple positions, causing 2 dead. Now completely pinned down, the squad is unable to move. Squad 5, who is also pinned down and receiving fire from the same positions, is momentarily able to suppress the casemates, allowing Squad 8 to rush their target. A 50-kilogram charge is placed on top of the casemate, killing 2 Belgian and wounding several others. With the objective complete, the squad regroups and attempts to take a better cover position from the incoming fire. In the process, the squad leader is killed and several others are wounded. Only 3 members of Squad 8 would make it unscathed. While this was taking place, the glider carrying Squad 9 manages to land 60 feet from their target, Casemate 13. Like Squad 6, they also land in barbed wire and begin receiving small arms fire. Upon noticing Squad 9's situation, Squad 7 rushes into the firefight and is able to suppress the Belgian soldiers, enabling Squad 9 to exit the glider and move on to their objective. Using a flamethrower, the squad is able to push back the Belgians manning the machine guns inside the casemate. The 50-kilogram charge is then placed on the steel door leading to the interior of the casemate. The resulting explosion blows the door inward and destroys the supporting wall, creating a large opening. The objective is then immediately cleared by Squad 9, killing and wounding multiple soldiers in the process. Squad 10, originally assigned as a reserve force, receives the order to attack Casemate 20, Squad 2's original target. Immediately after landing, Squad 10 proceeds to their objective, returning fire on their approach. Once at the casemate, a 12.5 kilogram charge is laid on top of the casemate and detonates. The resulting explosion kills a crew member manning the gun and wounds another. With their objective now complete, the squad establishes a defensive position. Within less than 15 minutes of landing on the fort, the assault force had managed to take out all the guns that could destroy the bridge. All that remained was to ensure that the Belgians did not mount a successful counterattack before German reinforcements could arrive. At 6:30 am, 2 hours after the assault had begun, the German combat engineers would begin taking heavy indirect fire from Belgian artillery, wounding multiple members of the task force. The Belgian troops inside the fort would try to counterattack the Germans multiple times. However, they would be repelled and chased down the tunnels every time. As a result, multiple roof entrances are blown up by the combat engineers. West of the fort, the Belgian forces would muster 250 men and attempt to counterattack. Unbeknownst to them, a fleet of Stuka dive bombers had recently joined the fight. With daylight now breaking through the horizon, the acting platoon commander of Task Force Granite is able to relay the enemy location to the bombers. Throughout the morning, the Belgians would get pummeled by Stukas, and eventually abandon the attack after having sustained heavy casualties. At 2 p.m, the commander of the fort gathers 60 men and attempts to sneak to the surface through an emergency exit. Not realizing the Germans had already discovered the exit. Just as the Belgians were attempting to breach the door, a charge is detonated, killing multiple soldiers. This would be the last counterattack by the Belgians. Throughout the remainder of the day, each time a casemate would begin firing again, the German engineers would destroy it. On the 11th of May at 8:30 a.m, Assault Force Granite is officially relieved by elements of the 151st Infantry Regiment, marking the end of the mission. In the aftermath, 65 German paratroopers would have engaged and soundly defeated a Belgian force 10 times their size, protected by the largest fort of its day. Assault Force Granite would sustain 6 dead and 20 wounded, a sharp contrast from the Belgians that would sustain 60 killed in action and over 1,000 soldiers captured. There is little doubt that the assault is one of the most impressive victories of the Second World War. That being said, some key elements were crucial in determining the outcome of the battle. The plan needed to be well rehearsed and simple enough so that the lowest ranking member of the assault force could react independently to any complication. The execution would need to rely on speed and surprise in order to gain a tactical advantage. And last but not least, the members participating in the mission would need to be fervently determined to see it through. The successful attack on Fort Eben Emael would permit the capture of the 3 bridges of Albert Canal, ushering in the invasion of Belgium, the Allied retreat at Dunkirk, and the capitulation of the French. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing to this channel. Also, feel free to suggest any future topics in the comments below. Thank you for watching.